So a few friends asked me to record how I do this, and my headbands, and what I do, so here it is. Material-wise, I use foam, and a lot of foam. It's really sturdy, you can use glitter without having to get it all over yourself, and it's really nice. You can also use cardstock to add a bit more color and variety that foam doesn't have in stores. You'll also want scissors, pens and pencils, and hot glue. You can use super glue, but it's painful. Hi, I forgot to mention when you're doing the hangul for the first time, make sure you write reflected on the paper, so backwards. This is what it looks like if you're doing like yes. You don't have to use adhesive foam, but it is the easiest to work with to stick it to everything else. So for the hangul, I would use adhesive foam. So flip it over, and I actually freehand everything that I do, so don't take it to heart if you can't get it straight. But my number one tip is to overcut your lines. If you cut too much, you can't go back, so just take your time. If you look at what I'm doing, I cut out things block by block, symbol by symbol, character by character, and then I go in and edit it as I go along. Before you cut out the holes in your circles, it's easiest to cut everything out because you might hurt your hands like me and cramp them if you cut your circles as you go along. So just get everything perfect and then put your circles down. The easiest way to cut circles is to cut from the front of the foam, whether you have adhesive or not, to the back. And I know it may be hard to see, but if you use a camera or a mirror, it's easier. But if you look, you'll see how the adhesive in the front of the foam sticks through. If you do it from the back to the front, then it's going to poke through and it's going to look like a mess. The other thing I recommend doing is cutting a line like I'm doing right now and doing it on both sides. You can also do it in quarters, which I'll show in a second, and it makes it so much easier to cut. The other way to do it is if you have something smaller or larger, it works both ways. You know how a cup has the 4 sections at the lid? So basically you're going to be doing that, and then you can cut it in 4 quadrants instead of 2 halves. I almost said 4 halves, I'm an idiot. Can you see what I mean? It sticks up like a lid. Yeah? Okay. It makes it a lot easier to cut. So moving on to the cardstock, there's going to be a rough side, which I am horribly trying to show in this, but basically you'll see that little tabby thing, that almost like printer ID on it. Start drawing on that side. Making sure that you're on the tabby side, I don't know what to call it, on the rough side. Orient your thing, your hangul, towards yourself, because I had it oriented towards the camera, and flip it over backwards as the way you originally drew it. I don't do measurements, but when you start outlining it, again, do the whole over-cutting thing with this, since it is the cardstock. But I would say just a little bit out, however much you want. So in some cases I make the cardstock thicker, and in some cases I make the foam thicker in the middle or the center or wherever you have it. It really depends on what theme you're going for, but I did about a medium thickness and I ended up actually cutting it down a lot. Once you have both of your pieces cut out, flip it over and place your hangul on it appropriately, and then see how much you want to take off. Like this I thought was way too thick, but again, like I said, I overcut everything. So I marked with my pencil roughly how much I wanted to take off, and keep in mind you can't go back, so I recommend using a pencil because you're on the front of your piece now. I actually ended up redoing the yo, part of the yo sung, because it wasn't the same height as the sun, and so now it's the same height. I'm taking the sung and I'm rounding the corners. It looks a lot better, it looks a lot neater, it looks a lot prettier. The only part of this that I don't round is obviously the round parts, and the sheet, the S, the thing, you know what I mean? Because it's at an angle itself. Rounding the corners is literally just moving your scissors around the corner. I don't know how else to explain it, but you can see me doing it, so yay, magic. Once everything's perfect, remove the adhesive from the adhesive foam and stick it on the cardstock in the correct direction. Make sure you're doing it on the correct side in the correct direction. I don't know how you can mess it up, but it is a bit maneuverable. I actually messed up right here, but I didn't care. So I kept it because I thought it looked cute and curvy. Flip it back over and go onto the back of the next foam or cardstock. I recommend foam, and make another outline the same way you did the first one around the hangul, but this time it's going to be one entire outline. You could not do this outline if you don't want it to be as bulky, but I like doing it because of the glitter, because I like glitter and it's cute. I also really messed up, and I wanted to die. Flip your stuff over and line it up, make sure it looks good. I again overcut, and so you can see me trimming everything and rounding the corners of that foam before I stick it on there. I also right now have the hot glue heating up so I can stick the cardstock onto the foam because the cardstock is not adhesive. It's optional, especially if you're not using an adhesive foam, but because I'm using an adhesive foam, I'm using another set of foam that matches my theme, and I'm sticking it behind the adhesive foam. I'll show you what it looks like later, but here it is. For this outline, you are not putting it backwards, mirroring it, or reversing it. Outline it as it is. And when you cut it out, make sure that you're cutting just a little bit on the inside because you don't want the back of it to show through. So now we get to hot gluing. You can either put the hot glue directly onto the foam or directly onto the cardstock, but make sure you're doing it one piece at a time. Otherwise, A, the hot glue will cool down too fast, and B, you may not be able to manipulate it how you want. So doing this, I'm able to get back under it because the cardstock and the foam are both pretty flexible, and I can adjust it however is need be. This is really important if you're doing things like shapes and stars. This is the worst thing, cutting off the ears. The best way to do it is to cut a slit in the ear and then pull it, and hope for the best. I cut two little hearts out for decorations, and because the back is going to show, I actually cut on the inside of the line rather than the outside, as you can see, and then I cut them both to be at a little bit of a slant so that they can go up on the corners of the outline. To trim the stems before you actually attach them, I guess they're stems, you can mark it with a pen, that's the easiest way, and then cut a little bit below that. And they're usually pretty easy to cut unless you see me struggling. Look at that, watch. Yep. Once you know everything is perfect, then you can go ahead and glue down the front of the hangul. You can do the front and the back, or you can do both fronts. I usually do both fronts. I would also make sure that you cover the little bit of residue from the ears if you have any, but usually the outline will cover it. So go ahead and remove the adhesive film from the back once you have everything attached on the front. If you don't have adhesive foam, then you'll use hot glue, which I tend to do anyways. Once it's removed, then you can go ahead and put super glue on both the stem and just a bit on the sides of the adhesive, just to make sure it doesn't fall off during concert, pictures, whatever. And when you put it on, make sure that you press down from back to front. Otherwise, the front will curve into the back and it'll kind of look like a pie, but you want it to look like a pie in the back, not in the front, you know what I mean? When you're attaching something to the back, get a general idea of where you want it from the front, flip it over to the back, and lift it up very gently and put hot glue right underneath that, and you should be able to adjust it from the front as need be. I also decided to tie a ribbon, so here's a small little time lapse of me tying it. There's no real way for me to show you because A, I have really small hands, and B, it's complicated, but I will link below how to tie a double-sided ribbon, because that's a double-sided ribbon, but it works for all of them. Once that's cut and hot glued, that's pretty much it, and I think it's adorable. And here are some other things that I've made, and if you have any questions or want me to replicate one that I've already done, just let me know. Thanks so much!
Just want you to stay.